Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video we are going to see how we could use CoPilot in SQL Server Management Studio, which has been launched within version 21. So SQL Server Management Studio is only available for Windows. So technically you would need Windows operating system to try out this. And you would also need an Azure OpenAI endpoint as well as a deployment of some model in order to make it work. So if you see, I've already installed SQL Server Management Studio 21. This is generally available, and this could be used to connect on to the CTP version of 2025, which is yet to be fully released by Microsoft. And this could also be used to connect to the older versions of SQL Server like 2022 or 2019. This version of SQL Server Management Studio is primarily based upon the code base of full-fledged Visual Studio. So that's why you would see very fundamental kind of similarities between the Visual Studio as well as SQL Server Management Studio. So you could change out the themes. You could even see how the processing of the commands is done, how the immediate suggestions for your code completions are done. They are almost similar to the Visual Studio. So let's see if I try to connect on to the SQL Server with the help of SQL Server Management Studio. So fundamentally, I'm running a SQL Server 2022. It's a developer edition, and I'm running over here. And if you see, there is a CoPilot stuff over here, which is an addition to this SQL Server Management Studio in order to enable the generative AI as well as the artificial intelligence within the SQL Server Management Studio. But in order to use this, when we click over here, this CoPilot could be used, and you would require fundamentally two things. One is the Azure OpenAI endpoint, and one is the Azure OpenAI deployment. Of course, it asks about the third option, which is Azure OpenAI API Key, which is an optional one, but you could supply these three parameters in order to make it work. Now, for running an Azure OpenAI endpoint and deploying a model. So let's say I go on where I have an Azure AI Foundry. So you would fundamentally need an Azure portal account to deploy to have a let's say an Azure OpenAI endpoint, as well as for example deployment of the model. Now before that, let's fundamentally see how that looks like within the portal for an Azure OpenAI deployment. So in Azure OpenAI is just kind of a service which you could configure within the portal. And if I see, I just need to switch my directory because it has gone on to a different one. Let's say switch. Okay. So here I've already deployed an OpenAI, which is Azure OpenAI service. So I've already configured that, and these are the endpoints which I could fundamentally use. So you would need an endpoint which is like over here. So you could copy that, and let's say we just need that, and I'm just gonna copy this. So this is my Azure OpenAI endpoint. So that is one. The second thing which we need is once you have the endpoint, so you would need the deployment model. So I'm already there in the Azure OpenAI Foundry, and there is one model which is a text embedding model which I've already deployed. But let's say I just want to deploy some another model, so I could choose a deploy base model or a deploy fine-tuned model. The base models are which are already available, like for example GPT, ChatGPT version 4, Mini or whatnot. But the deployment fine-tuned model are more likely the models which you have kind of fine-tuned based upon your specific use cases and business requirements. So let's deploy this base model. So once you click on here, The next thing is you would have to choose upon the model which you want to use. So let's say I want to use the GPT one, and I just want to use the GPT. You have all these models if you see. So let's say I just want to go for GPT this one 40 chat completion model, and I could just confirm that. So once you confirm it, it asks about certain kind of rate limitations and pay per for the API calls. It is of course charged based upon the usage you do. So I'm just gonna deploy that, and this model, once it is deployed, so if you see, I have now two models which is deployed. So this is the model name which I'm gonna use. So I can just copy that. So I'll copy it and paste it over here, which is the second one. I need that. Oops, it didn't copy, probably I pressed the wrong button. So I could just copy it one more time, copy, go back over here, and then I'll just use paste. So this is my model name. And the third thing is you would need an OpenAI API key. So once I go on to this, so this I can just copy that key, one of the keys from there. So which is the third thing, although it is an optional one, but I would still need this. So this is the OpenAI Azure API key. So that's the one which I'm going to use. So now these things, I have it. So I'm just going to copy this, let's say copy, and I'll just go on to the SQL Server Management Studio. So this is the first one which I want to give as an Azure OpenAI endpoint. That's one. The second is the Azure OpenAI deployment model. So the deployment model is the name which we have already deployed. So I could just copy that and come over here, and I could paste it over here. So this is the second option, and the third one is the Azure OpenAI API Key. So you would need that. So the Azure OpenAI Key is this one. So I'll copy this, go back over here, and I'll just paste it over here. Now once I click on, I'll just use the launch CoPilot, and it works around. It actually starts off my session, and it says CoPilot in SMS, ask any question about SQL or anything. So let's say I have a test database and I have some tables out there, some just random tables. Now if I just want to ask about, can you please tell me about table department? So if I just ask about and run this, so this is gonna run it, and so you would see it tries to search upon the table department, and because it is not connected onto a specific one, so let's say we'll just try to use a new query, and we'll just say use test database. Okay, so that's here. I'll copy that, and now I'll again ask about, could you please tell me about table department from test database. So once I run this, it tries to run that query, and it would try to process the schema, because I'm asking a question about could you please tell me about the table department. Now based upon all the metadata and every information which is trying to get through, so it says it gives you the relevant information like who is the owner, schema, type, it's a user table created, ledger type, file group, and then the specific columns out there, which columns are there, any indexes which are running, whether in the form of a primary key or a unique key or any kind of a constraints on that. So if I just ask about could you please give me top 2 departments from department table, so something like this. So I'm just asking that stuff in a natural language query. I'm not asking it in a different way, and it is able to process that, put that NLP into the actual schema, get that relevant results with the help of generative AI, and then pass it back to you. So once I run it, so it would actually be able to run that query for me. And so if you see, it is able to get me the top 2 departments from the dbo.dpt table. So I have like a department number, department name, location, and created that. So guys, this is probably like a very basic example or a usage of a CoPilot. You could in fact like create, let's say, table, for example, test department in test database, let's say, with columns department number and department name. So if I try to run this, let's say I'm asking in natural language, hey, could you please create a department test department table in the test database with some columns, department, and DPT name. So if I try to run this, it is going to actually execute that query and see if that syntax runs or not. And then it actually tries to know if it tries to create that the query for you, exactly everything. So you could just copy that, and you could just use even copy or insert. So if I insert it, so it would automatically insert it within the actual query window, and you could run that. So those are the, I would say, the capabilities which SQL Server Management Studio provides with the CoPilot enabling within embedded within that. Of course, you would need a couple of more details like Azure OpenAI and the API keys and the deployment model. I hope, guys, this is going to be helpful. You could start off your journey with the CoPilot in SQL Server Management Studio. Now, there is another thing which I want to let everybody know, that once you enable this CoPilot, so every time you open it out, you cannot now exactly, there is no way by which I can remove the parameters and I could again configure it, let's say, with some another model. For that, if you want to do it with some another model, you would have to remove, right now I've tried it multiple times, but you would have to remove the SQL Server Management Studio, install it one more time, and then do it. Of course, you can find out videos where people would tell you that you could remove like only the CoPilot stuff from the SQL Server Management Studio and reinstall it, and then it would ask for the configuration. But no, for me it didn't work. It again asks you for it does not really ask you for the configuration, again picks up the last configuration which you did. So then what I did is I uninstalled the SQL Server Management Studio and reinstalled it, and then finally I was able to reconfigure it with any another model or another Azure OpenAI endpoint. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll be coming up with more videos on my channel. Hope everyone is fine and staying safe. Thank you.